Today we are going to be looking at Arctic Fox in the color Peach Prosecco. So first thing you may notice about my swatches is that they are numbered. I do just want to say that is not synonymous with hair levels. Since I do different video clips, pictures, whatever throughout the video, the numbers are just help us to keep track of each swatch throughout my video. Also, my swatches are not virgin hair, which means they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached at some point in their existences. 1 is green, 2 is gray, 3 is like a medium toned natural red, 4 is a soft black, and then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So to start, I'm going to take the color directly from the container and I will apply it to the very top of each swatch. Then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the very bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind, everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair can take color differently. Not only that, colors between monitors and screens can definitely change quite a bit in undertone. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you.
Cause it's just you and me, intertwined, thread one. It's the only poison strong enough to convince me that this is real.
For the diluted section, we are going to do a 4:1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of the dye to 4 parts diluter. Now that is way more diluter than I've used for the other pastel colors, but I tried it and it seems to be holding its pigment all right. So I guess we'll just run with it and see. I think it'll be a good way to test just how pigmented this color might be in comparison to the other ones. Also, if you are unsure what diluter is, my simple quick answer is that it's basically something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Some brands, like Arctic Fox, do make their own version of a diluter that will keep the same consistency and in my experience can be very nice. But because I do so many different brands and videos to keep consistency for my videos, I always just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. Alright, I'm gonna let these sit for about 2 hours so that the swatches can really absorb the color. I will then rinse it out, and when they are dry, I'll meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So again, as a reminder, my swatches are not virgin hair. Virgin hair tends to be less porous, which essentially means it can struggle to take and hold on to semi-permanent color. So even though I do actually see a difference all the way to my number 5 swatch, which was like a dark brown, this being a pastel dye especially can mean your results will definitely vary. So I definitely recommend a strand test. So number 1 was originally green. I would say if your goal is to cover the green, probably make sure at the very least that the green is lighter than my swatch. But honestly, if I were you, I would probably just pick a slightly more pigmented dye just to be safe. So on the direct dye portion, I do see some green coming through. I do also see some peach as well, but it's a sort of mixture. And then on the diluted section, the swatch itself looks a little bit more muted. So I'm sure the peach canceled out a little bit of the green, but it's just not pigmented enough to fully cover. 2 was the gray swatch. So looking at the number 11, the gray swatch definitely is not as saturated, which is pretty normal. So overall, it just has a slightly more muted, dusty look. And cool tones, generally, they don't reflect light as well as warm tones do. So the gray coolness underneath kind of pulls back that brightness, but it did take on both the top and the bottom. Number 3 was the natural red. Sometimes the way that that one turns out, I will have to lump it in with 7 and 8. Today, the undertone definitely played a big role in the outcomes, so I do not have to do that. Essentially, it still looks like a natural red. It's probably hard to tell in this particular lighting. Especially on the bottom half, I'm not totally sure if it does look any different. We'd have to look at the before and afters. But the top, the direct eye portion, I definitely see some of that peach coming through. The cool thing about using colors like the peach Prosecco over natural reds is it sort of amplifies the colors in the hair naturally. So depending on what type of warmth you're looking for in your hair, you can choose a semi-permanent dye to reflect that. So if you want more like a golden red, you can use a yellow over your hair. In this case, the peachy tones in this dye help to bring out some of the peachy warmth in this hair, which is really pretty. 4 was a soft black. Sometimes if a dye is pigmented enough, it can kind of turn a soft black's undertone a little bit, but I do not see a difference on this one. So 5 again was our darker brown. Now overall, both 5 and 6 still look like brown swatches, but the color did seem to change the undertone a little bit of that brown. It's especially noticeable looking at the diluted section next to the direct dye. The top of both 5 and 6 have a little bit more warmth. But again, if your hair is virgin hair, I would probably recommend using a slightly more pigmented color instead of a pastel. I genuinely think the only reason you can see a difference on my swatches in this particular situation is because my swatches are not virgin hair. But overall, it's still very pretty, and I think using semi-permanents to even just change the undertone of your hair is a really cool concept. And I will also just say really quick, out of the 3 new pastel colors from Arctic Fox, I do think this peach one is probably the most pigmented. Warm tones in general tend to stick to the hair a little bit better than cooler tones, so that's probably why. So how I said that the 5 and the 6, they still look relatively brown. After you get to the number 7, it still looks kind of natural, but at the 7 swatch and lighter is where you kind of see more of that dye pigmentation coming through versus the color beforehand, if that makes sense. So 7, 8, 9, and honestly even 10, I'd say it almost actually looks sort of like rose gold over the swatches because you still do see some of those natural colors coming through from beforehand. They just get lighter as the color underneath gets lighter, which makes sense. It's sort of hard to tell if the diluted section changed for number 7. I think it did. I swear it was a little more golden before. Now it has a slightly more peachy look. On one hand, I do kind of wish I didn't dilute it as much as I did, but it's also nice to see the range that you can get with a dye and diluting it. But with how much I diluted it, I think the number 11 is the only more like truly intentional looking one on the diluted ones in terms of like dyeing your hair a different color. Over the 7 through 10, the diluted section almost looks like a nice wash of color, again, where you're like changing the undertone a bit of the hair beforehand. Interestingly, on the number 11, the direct dye, the color took really, really well, and it has an almost a little bit darker kind of dusty quality, but not dusty enough to be like, oh, this is a very like muted dye. I can just tell by looking at it, it's not insanely saturated. So if you work somewhere, for example, or you go to school somewhere that they don't really like dyed hair, something like the peach Prosecco could be a really good in between because that mutedness kind of helps make it look a little bit more natural. This would be kind of like a bridge between fun colored hair and natural hair. And then 12 was our toned swatch. I don't think you necessarily need to tone your hair to get a good outcome with this dye, but obviously you get a different outcome, so it's up to you what you like. I usually say that the 12 falls between the 2 and the 11. In this case, it did take on a more dusty look like the number 2 did, but it did take the color a little bit better like the number 11 did. So a little less saturated in terms of how bright it is, but still pigmented. As for comparisons, I actually was going to compare this to Arctic Fox's Frose, since that's their other like pastel color in this collection. But I opened my box for the Arctic Fox and I noticed I had a mix sitting right on top, must be meant to be, but I had mixed Frose and Cosmic Sunshine together to get a type of rose gold in the past, and looking at the undertone of that actually looked way more similar than the Frose would. So I figured we'd look at that one today. So this is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and comparable to number 9. So part of why I thought this would be a good comparison is because I already knew from doing Frose in the past that Frose is a very pinky pastel color and is not really similar at all to peach Prosecco. And the cool thing about this mix is since I did 2 different ratios, you can see the difference in how just adding some Cosmic Sunshine can change that. So the top half of my mix, it has a little less Cosmic Sunshine than the bottom. Obviously pink and yellow together, they make orange. And hopefully my camera can pick up on it, but even the top mix with less Cosmic Sunshine is still more pink than the peach Prosecco, which means Frose is going to be very, very pink in comparison. So I went ahead and moved all the swatches up so we can see the more orangey comparison. I think the undertones of this are actually very, very similar. The biggest difference is probably the dusty / muted tone of the peach Prosecco. You don't really get that mixing Frose and Cosmic Sunshine. I will say on the 9 and 10, they actually look pretty similar. The 11 is probably the biggest difference. So overall, peach Prosecco, a little bit dustier. And on like 11 and 12, it's also a little bit darker as well compared to my Frose and Cosmic Sunshine mix. And for the next comparison, I wanted to find my most similar, and I actually don't really have anything like this. The interesting thing about all of the other peachy kind of dyes that I've got is a lot of them actually lean much more pink. So generally speaking, if a lot of the peach dyes that you've used in the past, if they are too pink for you and you're looking for something more orange, the peach Prosecco could be really good for that. So my most similar comparison is Lime Crime in the color Sushi. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and number 9. Again, I'm not sure if my camera can pick up on the minute differences, but even on like 9, 10, and 12, even my Sushi swatch is a little bit more pink in comparison. So again, this peach Prosecco leans pretty orange for a peach. Out of what I have done anyways, Lime Crime has another color called Neon Peach. Undertone I would say is pretty similar to the Sushi, kind of like a pinky orange, but definitely a lot brighter, a little bit more neon. The Sushi is a little bit more dusty, which is why I decided to pick this as my most similar comparison, because it was the most orange peachy color that I already have and the most dusty. Now, if you like Sushi for how light it is and that like slight dustiness it has, which really, when I say that, it really does not have that much. It's just not a super, super bright color compared to maybe like a neon would be. Anyways, if you're looking for one that's a little bit more pink, the Uberless Peach Hydrangea was the most similar next to Sushi. It just leaned a tiny bit more pink. And then from there, I was looking between ColourPop's Peach, Lunar Tides, Neon Guava, and Lunar Tides Coral, and those all were a lot more pink in comparison, if you were wondering. So I feel like this peach Prosecco is pretty unique to my collection. And maybe in the future we will find a more similar comparison, but out of what I currently have, this is it. Now I would like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as anything past this point in the video, is all going to be done in natural lighting.
Cause it's just you and me, intertwined, thread one. It's the only poison strong enough to convince me that this is real. somewhere we've never been, stuck on a mountain down in Sheffield, running for the bus again. Maybe we'll just stay here. The coffee sucks, but I've not thought about leaving yet. You can quit that job you hate, and I can check the real estate. We've still got tomorrow. We can change our mind. Everybody's wondering where the hell we went this time. Maybe this is dreaming. Maybe I'm just blind. We can't run forever. Maybe we can
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very, very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.